Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. For those who don't know me, I'm Tim Kellett. I'm from Paydata. And Paydata, we are a reward management consultancy, and we work with lots of organisations to help them find, attract, retain, and motivate the right sort of talent and skills to be a successful organisation. We provide, those who don't know us, we provide information in a wide range of areas. Our pay benchmarking is sort of our core area, but we also support people with things like reward strategy, bonus scheme design. We have our own job evaluation methodology, pay grade. So we help organisations grade and create structures. We support the sort of pay review process with analysis. We help develop pay structures and pay using salary scales, which are very common these days. There's that internal focus, so looking at equal pay as well and helping people manage and determine whether they've got any challenges on that side. And then finally, we provide a lot of research and insights through regular surveys of HR and reward topics, industry HR workshops, and also, obviously, of course, webinars such as this one, where we get external experts to come in and talk about particular topics of interest which have come up in our industry workshops. And today I'm delighted that we've got Dave Roberts here, who's the MD at LBR Consulting. Dave is an HR transformation expert. And he's very kindly agreed to spare the time today to talk about best practice in this sector and provide strategies and lessons learned from all the work that he does to help HR teams build sustainable change, drive real adoption of systems and HR systems, and most importantly, avoid any sort of common pitfalls during HR transformation projects. And as I said, HR systems and HR transformation is a sort of a key topic that's come up time and again at our autumn and spring HR workshops. So thanks very much for joining us today, Dave. And Dave's going to talk about 4 key areas in this area. Before I release Dave, who's chomping at the bit to talk to you about this, I'm going to just set the scene a little bit and talk about what the current picture is, what our customers in lots of different industries are sort of telling us about how they're looking at HR transformation. And then we'll come on to sort of Dave's bits when he's talking about sort of implementing systems, whether that's sort of solely within HR and IT or as a wider IT program, how to set something up, a program up for success, some really useful practical tips and expertise, and the sort of importance of future design and having people doing the right roles and responsibilities. We will send out after today. We'll send out the slides to everyone, so all the slides that you'll be able to see we'll send out. We'll send out obviously Dave's contact details throughout as well. And what I ask is if you've got any questions you would like to ask, so you don't forget them, if you want to put them in the Q&A side of things, what we'll do is we'll hold those to the end, and we'll add some time at the end just to go for your questions and answer them. If we do run out of time, I'm conscious that everyone has lots of Teams meetings, and at 11 o'clock we'll have a hard stop at 11. So if we do run out of time and don't quite cover all the questions off, we'll ask Dave to answer those, and we'll send those answers out with the slides as well. So in every way we'll have you covered anyway. So I hope you find today useful. I'm going to start off, as I said, just to talk a little bit about the sort of a bit of context about the current picture. And we recently, we're currently running our spring UK Rewards survey. We have over 130 organisations who've contributed to the survey so far. And we asked them the question, actually, how satisfied are you with your current HR information system needs being met? And only 28% said that they are very satisfied. about half said that they were somewhat satisfied, so they're not fully satisfied. There's some niggles in there, and 14% said that they're very much not satisfied at all. So obviously, what that demonstrates is that there's work to be done. If over sort of 2/3 of organisations are not completely satisfied with their system. We sort of 70% said they widely utilise a system in their organisation, but 25%, so 1 in 4, quote that there's some resistance there, and to sort of implementation and to their current system, and that can be through a number of different reasons. Sort of organisation culture, we sort of said, they mentioned technological limitations as well. So the system doesn't do exactly what they need it to be doing as well. So obviously this shows that everything's not completely right. Not everyone has something that's working for them. So that was the first set of questions. We then sort of asked them, how much sort of focus have you got on in terms of improving what you've got at the moment? And 25% have said that in the last 12 months they've actually reviewed and changed their system in some way, but actually a higher proportion, a third, are actually looking to review and change their system. So that's a lot of people who are looking at this at the moment in comparison. And I'd back that up with most of our industry HR workshops, as I say, where it comes up time and again that people are looking at their HR systems as well. And one of the key phrases people say to us is short-term pain for long-term gain. So people recognise that there's some real advantages to having a really good system in place and a good process. But there's inevitably the sort of, when you're choosing a provider, implementing that provider, that can cause some challenges in the short term. But in terms of that long-term gain, here are the key drivers. I definitely think there's that sort of automation. Can we do things in a better way and automate what we're doing? Obviously, that improves efficiencies and productivity of people as well. I think this third point there, 76% of organisations have said that they use they're doing this because they want to improve the accuracy of their data and their reporting, and that comes across a lot in the HR workshops that we run. As I said, that people really are looking to make evidence-based decisions, and a key thing to that is having the right sort of data being collected and recorded and then analysed as well. So definitely that third one on the list there, and actually that last one as well. And I know Dave's probably going to come on to this around a bit of resistance around HR transformation and things, but actually it can help employees because there's a bit more sort of self-service there, both for employees but also for people who are updating the system. That could include HR as well. So some key drivers there for why people are looking to make the change and go through the challenges and of implementing it as well. So that's enough of me talking. As I said, we'll send out the slides afterwards, but I'm going to hand you over to the real expert in the room, and that's Dave, just to sort of talk about it. So thanks for joining, Dave, and over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. I'm a bit of pressure now being an expert, but we'll see what we can do. So hi everyone, thanks for taking time out of your busy days. This is, as Tim said, a very important topic and comes up time and time again. Just a little bit about us, about my company. So we are HR transformation experts, specialists. It's what we do. It's the only thing we do. We are a collective of HR practitioners, firstly, before we went into consultancy. So we've all actually done HR roles. So we understand HR, how it works, which I think is really important. And our focus is really on making change stick within both the function in HR, but also more importantly with the wider business. And yeah, we've done numerous programs over the course of 10 years. Before that, as I said, I was 20 years in HR. We're system agnostic, so we work with all of the big vendors, number of different SIs, and we are completely independent. a little bit about sort of the stages of transformation that we support with and we go through. So initially, we will, if we're engaged early enough, we do some work with clients around identifying what the problem is they're trying to solve in the first case, and what the actual vision is for the function and how that wants to work. Quite a lot of times in programs, that work doesn't take place. So there's a bit of a disconnect there at the start in terms of, has the program delivered, because the program didn't actually identify what the problem was in the first place. So that's a key stage. Then there's a part around identifying the solution. So we do a lot of work around vendor selection, identifying business requirements and making sure that they're met and they're needed, and that you make informed decisions on the right supplier that you're going to use. There's lots of great products on the market. They're all very similar, but they have sort of some different unique quirks and different functionality that you may want. And our role is to help you make sure you get the right product for you. Stage 3 is where we actually then bring it to life and make it happen. So we work very much with our clients. We're sort of an extension of the program team, and we'll work alongside you guys and actually help you in terms of the change, help you engage with your organization, help you in terms of target operating models, the whole real 9 yards for transformation. We will help you through right to the end. And what we do throughout is embed the business change and adoption. So we're continually working with both the function and the wider business in terms of making sure that people understand the change, what's going to change, what's going to happen for them, and make it stick. We also do a lot of work around knowledge transfer. So our role is to make sure that when we finish the transformation, the organization is fully equipped to sort of maintain it and continue it going forward. Because we see a lot of transformations that sort of fail or get stuck after go live, and then they don't reach the actual return of investment that they originally looked to when they were building their first business case. So that's a little bit about us. So I always like to have a bit of audience participation, which is quite difficult because I can't see any of you and you're not chatting back at me. So I hope you're all still awake. But I just got a couple of,
they are there.
I've got a couple of quick questions for you. If you could just sort of put some responses in the chat. So I'm just interested to know, and just answer yes or no to the first question. So how many of you have actually had an experience or gone through a HR transformation? And if the answer to that is yes, what sort of challenges did you face? Did you overcome? What sort of issues did you have to deal with? And I'll give you a few minutes to sort of populate that for us. We'll have a look at the responses.
I'll put one in there to start things off, Dave.
Yeah, that's good. Good to have one. Don't be shy. I'm not judgmental. Please don't be shy.
Oh yes, delayed. Yeah, delayed process. Is that a common one then, Dave?
Yeah, that's yes. It'd be interesting to know, Arminder, a bit more about what that is, but we'll probably take that offline, or we'll have a whole hour talking about that. People adopted change, you can lead horse to water. Yes, absolutely. Jenny, good point. Yeah, Anne-Marie.
Getting people on board. Yeah, isn't it?
Data quality is very important. Very, very important. Line managers not using system. Yeah.
Oh yeah, getting the actual data from the previous system onto the new system as well. Yeah.
Yeah. No two systems have the same data fields. That's always an issue. IT teams partnering, Michelle. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. We're going to talk about a lot of these things actually that are coming up.
Yeah, I suppose the comms really important, that people feel comfortable about it, don't they? And why they're doing the change.
Yeah. That's a very interesting last comment about the vendor oversold the product.
Yeah, that comes up in the HR workshops. We didn't get what we thought we were going to get again.
Yeah, there's a challenge with that in terms of the vendors are there to sell you a product and will tell you everything you want to hear. Part of the challenge, and it goes back to the previous point about helping with vendor selection, is making sure that you're testing exactly that they can do what you want them to do, because they will all tell you they can do everything. And why wouldn't they? So yeah, that's an interesting one. lack of customer support after go live. Right, there's some really great examples there. Thank you very much for humoring me and participating. Keep continuing to add more in the chat if you want to as we go along, if there's something that sort of resonates as we're talking through. But appreciate your input. So first off, I just wanted to give you some of the common myths that we come across that we have to tackle quite early on throughout programs and at the start. So there's a big myth out there, and I've heard this numerous times, that we'll implement a new system and it's going to drive and change the behaviors that we want in the business between line managers and HR. No system is going to do that. That's one of the biggest failings and problems with transformations. People think that they'll switch it on and everyone will use it. They won't. You have to give them a compelling reason for why it's changing and what you're expecting them to do. Otherwise, they don't know what they're doing. Everyone in HR and the business will buy into the change. So I deliberately call out HR and the business because some of the biggest resistors I've seen on a number of change programs has been within the function itself, within HR. And I say all this as a HR professional, by the way, so it's not a criticism. It's, you know, I've been one of those people that was resistant to change many years ago. So yeah, don't assume that that everybody's going to be bought into what you're trying to do. There'll be pockets and lots of resistance out there. HR transformation finishes once the new system goes live. You'll see that come through towards the end as well. Actually, HR transformation starts when the system goes live. That's sort of when the work really starts, and then you have to continue and maintain that. And finally, HR managers will embrace self-service, AI, and use the system as intended. I don't talk a lot about AI in this presentation because there's a lot of AI overload out there, but it's the new kid on the, well, not the new kid on the block. It's been around for a few years now, but in HR technology terms, you'll see AI absolutely everywhere. And there's lots of really good AI functionality. But that doesn't mean that HR teams and managers are going to use it. In fact, I know a number of clients that have AI enabled software but haven't switched it on. So there's just some common myths for you that hopefully resonate with some of you guys. A little bit around why transformations fail, and this data has come from a number of the big four consulting firms. There's some McKinsey's and Deloitte research into this particular issue. So they're saying that up to 70% of HR transformation / change programs fail. And the top 5 reasons for those, and we sort of touched on some of those already, but it's around change resistance. The technology trap is basically around the system being used, or the system implementation being delivered as an IT technological program, rather than it actually being a HR transformation or a business transformation. I'll touch on a bit of that in a minute. Leadership misalignment, so not being clear what you were buying, why you were buying it, and how it was going to work, and not having sort of clear success criteria. Poor user adoption, which we've already talked about a little bit, around sort of managers and HR not using the system as intended and carrying on using old spreadsheets or previous ways of working. And transformation fatigue. So what we see, there's another part of what we do, which is we have to go in and do some sort of recovery programs post go live. So transformation fatigue is where the program team gets burnt out, the business gets burnt out with the amount of change that's going on, because typically it's not just a HR transformation program that's happening, in isolation. There's normally other things that are happening. And people get to the point where they'll sort of put in the minimal product of a new system and don't actually implement the rest of the modules. So they might implement sort of the core system, but they don't put in the sort of bells and whistles and the value add stuff like the talent modules, reward modules, compensation modules. So that transformation fatigue is a real issue for these transformation programs and why they fail. So in terms of sort of some best practice and some tips and some things for you in terms of my experience and what we've seen and what we know and have heard from various different transformations that we've done. I have to start this by saying I'm completely biased. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm a HR professional. HR is my thing. So where I'm saying a HR system is unique, it's because it's the only system in any organization that everybody touches at some point. So every employee is going to book some annual leave. They might move address. They're all going to have performance reviews. So everybody touches a HR system. Doesn't happen in IT, doesn't happen in finance. So when I'm saying HR transformation is really business transformation, it's for that very reason. You're impacting everybody in your organization. Tim mentioned earlier about employee self-service and manager self-service. Everybody's going to use it. And for them to use it to its maximum, they need to understand how to use it and why they need to use it in the first place. The system is an enabler, but it won't drive the change alone. As I've already mentioned, you've really got it. The system will give you lots of benefits in terms of automation and lots of benefits in terms of different ways of working, but it will only work for you if people actually understand why you're doing it and what they're going to be required to do. There's a big piece here around the role of the manager. That's a piece that we see in a lot of organizations that people don't actually think about. So a lot of the systems are based on the premise of using self-service functionality. And that's a reliance on employees and managers to use it and notify when things are changing and things are happening. If they don't do that very quickly, your system becomes out of date and then people go back to using manual processes. So it's an enabler. It won't just drive the change alone. You need to consider sort of off-system processes as well as on-system processes. And in terms of the points around good systems implementation, I mentioned previously around the amount of different vendors out there and the good products that are available, but it's really important you pick the right product for you. And the other thing as well, so for you as a business, that is, and also having the right implementation partner is crucial. I have examples of where we've been involved in implementation partner selection processes where the implementation partner has told the business that just turning the system on is going to drive the change. So to my point above, that is not the case. And that client didn't know any different. And if we hadn't been in the room, they probably would have believed what they were told. So you really have to make sure you've got the right implementation partner who's going to challenge you appropriately, but make sure they challenge you in terms of adopting the system in the way that it's intended, rather than configuring it to work in the way that you've always worked as an organization. Because this is about looking at future change and optimization. It's not about carrying on doing what you've always done. Clear business case is about just making sure you've identified how much it's going to cost, what the return of investment is going to be over how long, but also making sure that you've got the right resources in place and the right funding so that you can have the right resources. And the success criteria is relating to both the program and the business. So how's it going to feel? What's the customer experience and the employee experience going to be at the end? And how are we going to know that it's been successful once we've actually delivered? In terms of how to set up a program for success, stakeholder alignment is really crucial, and at all levels in the organization, but particularly at the early stage at a senior level. So making sure that the exec team's fully on board and understand what's going to happen, and that you're managing their expectations and challenging them if their expectations are unrealistic. Same also with your HRLT and your HR function. It's really important they're on board and understand what you're doing and what the change is going to be, and make sure you manage those expectations so that they're real. And also it's important to think about dependent departments. So there's always some integrations and some dependencies on departments like finance. So obviously the HR system holds all the people related data and in some respects payroll data, but that has to align with finance. So obviously they've got all the costings across the organization. So there's a dependency there, and there's always dependencies also on the IT function. So it's really important to get their alignment and get their involvement early on in the program, and then maintain that as you're going through. Program governance is around making sure you've got the right sort of support. So things like steering groups, steering boards, design authority groups. So if you're going through sort of discovery phases for programs and you hit a roadblock where there's a disagreement in terms of what you need the system to do or what you want it to do versus what it's capable of doing, you want an escalation route, and therefore you need sort of appropriate people at a design authority level and then at a steering group level to make a decision if you have an impasse in the program that you can't resolve. I won't go through these verbatim, you can read them for yourself, but I'll pick out a couple of salient points. So the right internal and external resources need to be identified. I have seen lots of programs where internal teams have tried their best to do implementations, but if they don't really understand sort of the full transformation process and how it works and how it goes through and how you manage all those other different dependencies, that's another reason why sometimes transformations fail. So you need to make sure you've got the right people on board at the right level in your organization. You need to make sure you've got people who've got the right sort of influence, that they can make decisions and they're empowered to make decisions. What you don't want is to have a group of people that actually have no empowerment whatsoever and they have to keep escalating decisions. That will take your transformation from being sort of a 9-month program to 2-3 years and maybe never actually get delivered. Internal resources being fully dedicated is a really, really important point. Again, a lot of programs, and I've been on them, where they've set up an internal team and the expectation is that, I'll use Tim as an example because I can see Tim, the expectation is Tim's going to be a work stream lead for reward and compensation, but Tim's still got to do all of the annual pay review that we're going through, and that's a 3-month process. So Tim actually can only spend sort of 10% of his time on the program, and the rest of the time he's doing his day job. You can see that that's a disconnect, and that's never going to work. He's not going to have the capacity and capability to do both roles to its fullest. As great as Tim is, it's going to be impossible for him. So you need to make sure that you've got your internal resources fully dedicated, and therefore if you need to, you've got backfill in your budget so that you can bring other resources in to cover their day roles while they're doing the transformation roles. And a key bit there around the bottom about making sure that there's a clear stakeholder and change strategy as you're going through. So making sure people understand what's happening at various different stages in the program and how it's impacting them, and you're doing that at every stage of the program. If you do that just at the end and you just do it as sort of comms and training, the transformation won't stick. It will get delivered, but it won't be sustainable. So elaborating on the change strategy point I just made there, you need to make sure you've got full senior stakeholder buy-in to that. So you need to take them through what that change strategy is, how that's going to work, things like stakeholder mapping. You're going to need to look at sort of change impact assessments and make sure they're fully bought in and understand what's happening. And if they're not, then you need to spend more time with them to make sure that they do understand, because you're going to need their support and you're going to need their buy-in with their functions to actually drive some of this change through. Been a lot of different change programs that I've been on where managers are resisting and they're not buying in. But when you're very clear and say, we've got a strategy that's been agreed by your board, and this is the way it's got to be, and this is the way we're working, it reduces some of that resistance to the change. We've also got there about involving people at the right level who actually understand how the process works. There's a real challenge here around sometimes these programs and sometimes like process design can be done in darkened rooms with either just HR teams or at senior levels. And what tends to happen is they don't actually understand how the process works on the ground because they don't do it. And that's not a criticism of it, it's just not their job. So you really need to make sure you involve the people that actually are involved in doing the doing, because they're the ones that are going to know whether what you're changing is going to work or not and have the reasons for why not. And also they're the ones that you need to know if they have got other routes that they're going to try and use instead of adopting the system. You need to understand that, find that out up front, and then change that. And you need to work with them in terms of the new way of working and change the way that they have been working previously. But you can only do that by understanding how they're already working and how they're already involved in the process today. You've got to look at the end-to-end on and off system process mapping. So system implementations obviously focus purely on the system, but that's only half the story. Systems will not have conversations for you. A lot of decisions that get taken happen outside of the system. So you need to map what those processes is and those process steps are. So you've got a full picture of your end-to-end process, not just the system elements. Again, I've seen a lot of problems in programs where they purely focus on the system and then don't realize that there's things happening off the system that then cause a problem with what you're trying to do on the system. A bit at the end there around, so we sort of touched on this earlier, but ensuring impacted individuals understand what will change and why. So the real what's in it for me. So you really need to, sorry for the initials there. It's, yeah, what's in it for me? So it's really getting down to individual level and making sure they understand where appropriate. That is not every single individual in your business. I'm sure you've got hundreds and thousands of employees, but getting them to really understand what's going to change for them and why it's going to be beneficial for them. And if it's not going to be beneficial for them, explain why you're doing it. So they may not like it, but at least they understand why it's changing. I can give you an example of that with a client that we had. So we did a good job of senior buy-in. We had a really good job with the HRD who really led the program and was delivering all of the messaging that we needed to get out through various different stages in the transformation. And she was doing a senior leadership session one day, and one of the managers approached her at the end and said, "This really looks great, this new system you're doing, and I understand for you as a function and you as a program that it's the most important thing that's happening for you guys right now. But I've got people out in the field, they're not interested in this. It doesn't impact them. It doesn't have anything to do with them. So really supportive of what you're doing, but it doesn't mean anything to us." And she came back to us as a program team and said, "I've had this feedback. What do I do with this?" So I said to her, "Let's meet him." So it was during COVID, so we met him via Teams, and we sat down and had a conversation around, right, give us a process. Let's talk about a process. Let's talk about what you're doing for leave requests at the moment. He had a manual process where his PA was doing spreadsheets, maintaining spreadsheets. People were phoning her in. So there was a broken process with various different steps in it. I asked him how that was being maintained, and he was like, "Well, it depends on whether they phone us. It depends on whether they tell us in the first place." So I just said, "Well, look, what if I told you could have an app on your phone, or they could, when they get home, they could put it on the laptop. If they have access to a laptop, they can put a request straight in the system. Within 5 minutes, it comes through to you, less than that, pings up on your phone. You just approve or reject it. You can check who's on leave at any time on your system. You can see all that. You don't need to do any manual maintenance. It's all there. You just need to make sure it's kept up to date." And he just went, "Is that what it will do for me?" I was like, "Yep, that's exactly what it does. That's all you need to know. If nothing else, that's going to improve things for you." And he was like, "That was great. That sounds great." He didn't believe me totally, because he said I was just a consultant and I would tell him that. But after we went live, what I told him did actually happen, and he then became one of the biggest advocates of the program after go live, and still is to this day. So, if you can really put it into their context, speak their business language, tell them how it solves their business problems, you're going to get an awful lot more buy-in than just sort of telling them this is what's going to happen. So what I would say is, if you do have resistors, don't be frightened to meet them, and don't be frightened to listen to their concerns and seeing how you can address them. The final point there is, just before then, identifying program advocates and potential detractors. Actually, I'd probably say detractors are more important to identify than the advocates, because if you can find a detractor, spend some time with them, you may not convert them fully, but if you can get them to actually buy in and understand what you're doing, you will then find that they will go and tell a lot more people for you. So, and also, if you find out who your detractors are, you can potentially dampen any noise before it starts. So you can sort of deal with it, address it, rather than it sort of turning into the best communication vehicle in every organization, which is the grapevine. And all of a sudden you've got a massive problem on your hand because they've told everyone that the system's rubbish and it's not going to work for them. Final point there is, don't assume the business and end users and wider HR team understand and buy into the change. I do a lot of process workshops as part of transformation, where we literally sit down and we map out the process step by step. So I've mentioned the off system and the on system stuff. I have been in many workshops where I've had HR people and business managers in the room, and I've had HR people saying managers won't use self-service, they want us to do it for them, they won't do it themselves. And I've had managers in the room arguing against the HR team. So, which is great for me because it sort of dispels the myth. But don't assume that they're going to buy in and they know it. So I would say get people together and work it through with them, and then they'll understand more and they'll then buy into it. And the final point there, which I can't stress enough, is engage continually throughout the program. Don't be seen as a program team that's sort of sitting there in isolation. Make sure you're continually telling people what's happening at different stages. They will be curious. They will want to know. They may not think it's the most important thing in the world to you, but they will want to know how things are going. And if there is silence, they'll fill it with noise, which you probably don't want. So make sure you're just continually engaging and keeping people up to date with what's happening. In terms of future design, so I say this continually, and this is sort of happening more and more with the advances in technology. HR transformation leads to fundamental changes to roles and responsibilities. So pretty much every part of the system automation now has an impact on somebody somewhere. And typically it's viewed that it's going to be within the HR function, but that's where I mentioned earlier about the role of the line manager is crucial. Those roles and responsibilities change massively. So if you think about some of the new technology around, or use recruitment, for example, as a module and a process, there's so many tools out there now where there's a whole load of automation where it will do interview scheduling for you. But the hiring manager is responsible for doing all that. It's not the HR recruiter or the TA team. And typically in a lot of organizations, it's TA team and the recruitment team that are doing that now. So if that administration work goes away, you then need to fundamentally change what their role is and what they're going to be doing moving forward. And hopefully that will mean they're able to do sort of more proactive strategic work in terms of talent pipelining and all that good stuff that they don't have time to do. But it does put an onus on the hiring manager to do a lot more than probably in some organizations they do today. So you need to be very clear that there's a fundamental change to that role and how that's going to work and what the expectation is them at the start of these processes. As I mentioned earlier, you should be looking at it as an opportunity to change the way that you work. Most systems will work in a specified way. They're very, very similar. As I said, there are some different unique quirks, but they are typically similar, and they all, like the old Ron Seal advert, they all pretty much do what they say on the tin. So you need to use that as an opportunity to say, if we're not working in the way that the system works, why won't the way the system work for us? Because if you configure the systems too much, there's so much new technology that's coming up. There's releases for all these systems every sort of 3 to 6 months where they're upgrading and updating their systems. If you configure them too much, then you've either got to do manual workarounds to make your configuration still work when the new release comes, or worse still, your system will become out of date very, very quickly. And that's another reason why some of these systems, some of the feedback you get around people being somewhat satisfied is probably linked to where the system has been configured a bit too much and it now doesn't work in the way that they thought it was going to and how it was intended. It's not just a systems piece. I've said this a few times, hopefully during this webinar, but you really need to think about your future operating models, your changes to the HR function and how you want that to work, and your changes to ways of working, and whether that's also dependent departments and managers that I've talked about previously and senior managers. Some of the examples of that is, there's a lot of organizations still, so systems are built on the way that it goes from sort of employee to manager as an authority route. That's sort of the standard. And there's a lot of organizations that we've had to do work with where they still operate in quite an old-fashioned way where the head of the department wants to see and approve absolutely everything. Well, that's not how these modern systems work. So you have to sort of explain to them how it's going to work, still explain they're going to still have visibility, but explain how they're going to be a blocker to processes if they want to continue working in that way. So it's really around making sure that people understand how, what your future operating models work and how you're going to change the way that people are working from their current day jobs at the moment. You've got to make sure that you continually review throughout the program, throughout testing and throughout go live. Keep going back, keep referring back to sort of original business case, those original success criteria. Are we still doing what we wanted to do? Is it still working in the way that we intended it to? Have we updated? Have we changed? Are we still working in the old way? You need to continually test that. And I'd say you need to do that probably even more so after go live. That's how you reduce the risk of people going back and reverting and doing what they've always done. So just one more slide for you. So I've hopefully not given you too much information overload. So apologies if I have. It's quite a broad topic and I could talk about it for hours. So I'm quite pleased I've condensed it down to 30 minutes. But these are some key takeaways for you that I say with every single client. And if you don't remember anything else, I think these are really useful things for you to remember. The system does not replace conversations. Even with AI, the system won't make decisions for you. It does not take away conversations. Human elements and conversations happen all the time and they have an impact on process. So you need to make sure that that's taken into account. And that's another key point why the system, another reason why the system alone will not drive the change that you want. I mentioned engage. You can never engage too much. I've worked with senior HR directors where we've given them the same message and we've told them to repeat it to senior teams, and they said, well, they've heard this. And I went, well, tell them again and tell them again, and when you think you've told them too much, tell them again. You cannot engage too much. You have to keep telling people what's going on so they're fully on board with you. Work does not stop at go live. That sort of get ready, I've heard it referred to before. I've also heard it, that's day one, but that's day one of sort of the program coming to life. So you have to continue to do it. Yet that's how you reduce the risk of transformation fatigue that I mentioned up front. You need to keep it going because some companies, some organizations, because of the size of the transformation they go through, might sort of implement a few modules first with a timeline and a plan then to implement further modules as they go through. So you need to make sure once you've started something that you continue it through. And therefore you need to make sure that you don't just finish. You don't just think it's all over and done at go live. And there will continually be changes, as I mentioned, with the new releases that come out from the vendors. There's always going to be things that change. There's always going to be things that you need to continue to do. And at the very least, you need to continue to maintain your system, which is the last point there, which is probably one of the most crucial ones to leave you with. I always say you only get one chance to get your data accurate, and that's on day one. If you put rubbish data into a system, you're going to get rubbish data out of a system. I have had to do a number of recovery programs, one in particular, where the reputation of the system, and it was a really good product, it was one of the top products, but the reputation was that it was absolutely useless. No one was using it. And the reason why no one was using it is because they did no data cleansing before they went live. And managers went in on day one, straight away saw that their reporting lines were wrong or their own personal data was wrong. And they just went, the system's rubbish. It wasn't the data's rubbish, it was the system's rubbish. And they never, well, they're still recovering from it now. And that was 5 years ago. So they are still having to deal with that reputation of the system from when they went live. So really make sure that you spend time to make sure that your data is accurate and ready for when you go live, because it's the only chance you're going to get to make it right. I think that's me, Tim.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. It's so kind of you. Some really interesting tips and just to share your experience of going through this. And there's definitely some familiar themes that have, which you mentioned, that have come up. Well, obviously in the comments when we asked, but also in the HR workshops as well. So that's really helpful, and it's obviously a complex project to go through, but it's good to know also that there are people out there, people like yourself, who can help people through that process as well. So yes, so that we're just sort of coming on to the questions section. So in your we've got the Q&A section there. So if you've got any questions to pose to Dave, he's all ears. He's receptive to that, and you can benefit from having someone who's gone through these processes. So, does anyone have any questions they want to post on the Q&A? And maybe whilst we'll wait for people to post them, I did have one just going through. When you were going through this, we talked about sort of there's resistance in an organisations perhaps, and or maybe maybe there's sort of pockets of resistance. So when you've done work with organisations, how have you sort of addressed that and dealt with those sorts of different pockets of resistance then, Dave?
So I'll give you a few examples. I mean, probably the best one to give, most relevant to this population, is actually within HR. So and it's with people that weren't really engaged or involved with the program. So like more operational teams, recruitment teams. And it was really, as I've mentioned previously in the presentation, it was sort of really understanding their concerns, spending time with them, engaging with them, sort of listening to the voice of the customer and then addressing them. But it was very much around, it goes back to the what's in it for me. And some of it's difficult because sometimes you get people, the resistance within the HR function because they think their jobs are going to be at risk.
Yep.
And that's not always the case. It's, in a lot of cases, it's actually repurposing what they do and giving them more time to do some of the more strategic stuff that they don't have the time to do and the capacity to do. So it's freeing up some of that time from them. But you have to really explain it to them so they understand, why it's going to be beneficial for them. And then you can get, I can't say you're going to please everybody all the time. You're always going to have some people that are naysayers and are not going to like it, but you can minimize them by actually listening to their concerns and, more importantly, doing something about them. If you just listen to them, they just think, well, you don't, nothing's really changed on the back of it. But really getting down and understanding what's going on and then helping them and understand why it's going to be better for them, that makes a big difference. I did see one question's come up in the
Yes.
in the
From
chat,
Leah,
which someone's
yes.
like, not thanks, Leah, not a difficult question, this one. So advice on managing change fatigue. So change fatigue so these programs are not easy, is the nicest way to put it. They are all consuming for, as I say, they can be 9 months to 2 years, depending on what you're doing and what systems you're implementing. Really, with change fatigue, and I presume we're talking about within the program team, and we can talk about what it means in the wider business as well. But with the program team, it's continually celebrating successes, continually making sure that people are supported, equipped to what they need to do. A lot of what you see with the program teams, particularly if they can understand the benefit of what they're doing, then some of that change fatigue goes away. But it is a hard slog. It is not easy. And sometimes just, having a bit of fun, these programs are very, very difficult. And sometimes just having a bit of fun can really, really help things, and celebrating the successes is really, really important. I hope that answers your question, Leah. There's a couple more in there as well.
Yeah.
Is it better to cut your losses and run with a failed system implementation, or to keep persevering with a system that is not fit for purpose? I would say no. I would say don't keep persevering with a system that's not fit for purpose. You need to think about the contract that you've got and how much you're tied in, and if there's any financial consequences of that. But no, I would say if you're having a failed implementation or you're persevering with a system that's not fit for purpose, I think you probably need to go back and really think about what it is you want and probably revisit it. And that's painful because you've probably already gone through like a year or two of a program, but it's probably better to do that than to just keep carrying on doing something that's not going to work at the end, because you're going to have to replace it in the longer term anyway.
I guess the hidden cost there is also the sort of extra time and resource it's taking to try and make it work in whatever way. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's very good question though. But yeah, if a system's not fit for purpose, then it's probably never going to be, and you're just going to continually have to deal with the problems of it. So you're probably best to cut your losses and try and look at something new. Advice on getting other departments on board who are not as keen as we are on implementing a new system. Yeah, I can't believe what departments you're referring to there, Anne-Marie. It's around really, as I say, the engaging with them and understanding the benefits of the system. And if you've got dependent departments, it's very important for them to understand how it will make their life easier as well. And some of that's around sort of how you're managing data migration and integrations with dependent systems. But it's really, really the what's in it for me, and explaining to them how things are going to be better and easier. A lot of this stuff is around, making things easier for managers and making things quicker. A lot of what you're doing is not just efficiencies in HR, it's efficiencies across the board in terms of time taken. There's lots of studies, if you talk about sort of recruitment modules, there's loads of studies on cutting down time to hire and quality years of hire. So, if you can really put those in business contexts and explain to some of these departments, how it's going to make things easier, quicker and better for them, but they're going to have to engage with it, then you find that they're actually, again, maybe not total fans and they're totally keen on the new system as we are in HR, but they'll at least understand why you're doing it.
Is it good to get people engage with those other departments sort of early doors, early in the process, get them, yeah?
I bring them in. I bring them into process workshops. It's best to address the concerns. It's best to address. I'll give you one other example, this has actually happened. I won't say which client, I won't say who it was, but I have actually been in a workshop where I've had a manager saying I'm far too important to push a button. And you have to deal with that. You have to address that. Luckily, he said it in front of a load of his peers, and they all sort of laughed when he said it. But then afterwards, we spent time with him individually, and then explained to him what pushing a button actually meant, and how it was literally a second out of his busy day, and how it was going to speed things up for him and his team and improve stuff. And then again, he became a bit of an advocate. But yeah, it's I'd get them on board early. I'd get them understanding why. But this is where, again, the senior stakeholder engagement is really important up front, because you want them, it's not all about having the senior leads responsible for this, but having their involvement and their agreement, you can get them to manage some of the messaging for you within their own departments as well. So as long as they're on board, they can help you manage some of that resistance.
We've got a couple of questions on the Q&A which came up next, actually. One from Harminder, which is, should we involve staff at the UAT stage, user acceptance testing stage? Yeah.
Great question. Yes, absolutely. Don't just use your HR team. Two important points with UAT. Make sure your test scripts are actually really testing the system. The point of user acceptance testing is to stress test the system and make sure it's actually going to do what you want it to when it goes live. So you want to try in the nicest possible sense, but to break it. So make sure your test scripts reflect that. And yes, it's a really good tool for engagement and a really good tool for embedding change. Involve managers, involve other dependent departments in the program. And also your HR team. So yeah, absolutely involve staff within your UAT stage.
I think we've got Sonia just made a comment, having implemented a number of systems as an HR professional and now being an implementation consultant, do not underestimate the time required by the HR team to test, data cleanse and communicate. System champs across the business also work really well. Get them involved in the process mapping and testing. I think that's probably just backing up Sonia, what you were sort of saying, isn't it, really?
Totally agree, Sonia. We haven't really talked about change networks and change champions, but yeah, having people not just in HR that are managing some of that messaging for you and are advocates are really, really crucial for our transformation.
Then Rakshanda had a follow-up question. What advice would you give to small HR and IT teams who are resource strapped, both in terms of staff and finances, and unable to commit was also required to a successful implementation then?
So, I mean, very much, yeah, that's a challenge in terms of your finances, because obviously that's going to cost, and there is a way that you can do it where you have a small team that that are external that come in and support you, but obviously that costs. So it very much depends on it probably need to know a bit more from your Rakshanda around that. Might be worth sort of having a conversation offline, just to sort of see if I can give you some more special advice on that. That seems like a more specific question than some of the others, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. We can put you in touch, of course. Cool. Nina said, would you say the operational teams are fundamental to a successful new system?
Nina, can I just ask, just to put in the notes, can I ask you what you mean by operational teams? Are you talking about HR operational teams, or are you talking about sort of operational teams in terms of sort of frontline employees?
It might be that actually. Frontline employees, maybe. So,
So
those working
working
from
from HR with the system. Yeah. So absolutely. If you think about, so this is why I said about future operating model. So there's work outside of the system that I always do with businesses around the HR way of working. And a lot of that is spent with sort of the individual teams. So whether it be if you've got business partner teams, if you've got center of excellence teams and operations teams, and getting them to understand how each of those works with the system, but also how they work with each other. And that's a really, really important part in making sure that a transformation sticks. Again, it's not necessarily specifically around the system, but it's more around sort of fundamental ways of working. But I always say HR operations, shared services, whatever you call it in your organizations, is the most crucial part of any HR function because it's sort of like the heartbeat. It's where stuff gets done. And if there's stuff that's not working in that operational team, then it really impacts on the ability of the business partners and the COEs to do what you want them to do. So yeah, absolutely, you've got to use operational teams. And just to add on that, sorry, Tim, just quickly, I know we probably need to wrap up in a minute. But that point around making sure that you've got the right people at the right level, the ones that actually understand the process, a lot of those come from your operational teams. So they're absolutely, you need to use them and they will help you. Thanks for ever clap then. Was that my mum? Has my mum joined the call?
It's good to have an advocate, you know.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, exactly.
it's because people agree, don't they, with you? So I think I had better draw it to a close. I mean, we've got a good number of questions from people there. So thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Nina.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that's helped answer your questions. If anything does spring to mind afterwards, and you want to, you can obviously get in touch with Dave straight away. You've got his details there on the screen, or you can speak to us, and we can pass on any questions anyway. We'll send out the slides to everyone. I think we've recorded this as well, so we'll send out the recording as well if you want to share that with your colleagues. So I think that just leaves me to sort of say thank you so much for joining everyone and sparing the time out of your busy days. Thank you so much, Dave, for your insights today. It's been really fascinating to hear that, and to get the expertise of someone who does this all the time, that week in week out for years, and for someone, as you mentioned, someone who's been on the HR, sat on the other side of the table as well. So thank you very much, and we hope we have the rest of the day is good for everyone, the rest of the week, and we'll see you all again soon. So thanks a lot, everyone, and thanks for joining. See you again soon. Bye bye now.